back. This is Rachel with the Book Mavens, and I have a series review for you today. I've been mentioning a few times in previous videos that I've been trying to do more of a deep dive or in-depth look at more indie author stories, still within fantasy and sci-fi, of course. But there's a lot of interesting things. There's been a lot of promotion. It's very interesting to see different platforms authors are using, and so I've just been exploring some different stuff. But one I kept seeing over and over again was Carissa. Broadbent is her name, and her trilogy, The War of Lost Hearts, and this is the first one, Daughter of No Worlds, and it's the first in a completed trilogy. So if you're interested, after I tell you what I think about it, they're all out. So we have Daughter of No Worlds, which is the first one. Sorry if there's a bit of a glare. You guys know that I obsessively wrap my books because I'm that person. And then the second book is Children of Fallen Gods. So we can see her there. And then Mother of Death and Dawn, which is the third and final book in this trilogy. Now, she has another series currently going. The first book is out, and it is The Serpent and the Wings of Night. All right, this has been a very, very popular topic on TikTok. In case you don't know, I do make TikToks as well. If you want some kind of shorter stuff, I'm just getting into it. I'm actually revisiting Hob because apparently everybody on TikTok only reads like Assassin's Apprentice and they don't do the entire realm. What a mistake that is, as you guys know. So I've been talking about Robin Hobb on TikTok. So if you would like to see what's been happening with that, my tag is Teddy Hawkfin, all one word. And I think each part is capitalizing as capital T, capital H, and a capital F. So if that is something that you'd be interested in to see me try to struggle with short clips, because you guys know by now that I can certainly run on. So it's been quite a challenge to create TikToks, but yeah. Anyway, I'm not going to talk about this one. I haven't finished it yet, so I don't want to share my thoughts yet with this one. But this is a vampire book, so you're dealing kind of with a dystopian, I guess it's dystopian, alternate world. I don't know. I'm not far enough in it. I'm really just started. I'm less than 50 pages in. Where it's like a human girl is taken in by like a vampire king. I don't know. And he's been training her to survive and whatnot. It sounds really cool. I'm enjoying it so far, but I'll let you know. I'll do a review to tell you what I thought about it and if I'll continue the series. All right. So, but let's talk about The War of Lost Hearts. So we're introduced to our main protagonist, Tisana, and this is her featured here. Now, she is somebody that's part of a kind of like a mixed race situation going on where they're called fractured, and she has dual tone skin. So she has patches of white skin and then patches of like a goldeny tan colored skin. I guess you could say this in terms of like representation of people who do have the dual skin tone, which I think is really, really cool. And it's something that makes her very unique in this world, and it's talked about a lot, which I really like. But this whole setup is that she is from a conquered nation, and she's a slave, and she does not want to stay a slave. And her owner, who bought her when she was still, I think she was only like 12, you know, and he of course raises her to do all kinds of things. And he had promised her that if she got, I think it was like 1,000, something like that, I forget the exact amount, to save all of this money, because when she goes to parties, people will like tip her even though she's a slave. So she's been hoarding all of this money, so she finally gets enough money to try and buy her freedom, and it doesn't go according to plan. And she ends up escaping and traveling to this island called Ara, or Era, it's A-R-A, where she is somebody, she does have possession of magic, And on Era are these two towers where you have two different types of wielders, is what they're called if you're magic users. And so she is trying to get aid because she had to leave a friend back home, and she wants to get enough aid to be able to go back and end slavery in her country. It's a big ask, right? So she's going to be tested, and she ends up getting paired with this guy named Max Centarius. It's quite the name. He goes by Max primarily, and it's a bit of a grumpy sunshine bit. It reminds me, if you're familiar with SJM, like the interactions with Aelin and Rowan a little bit in Heir of Fire, minus, you know, like the punching in the face. So it gives me those kind of vibes a little bit, a little Reese and Farah. I do see some SJM influence in here, there's no question. But it's not a copycat. It's nothing like These Hollow Vows, if you've ever read that. These Hollow Vows and These Twisted Bonds, it's a duology, which is an absolute copy of ACOTAR. It's like a combination of all three first books, and it's terrible. Like, at least if you're going to copy somebody else's material, you should do a decent job at it. And what's her name? I have those books. Lexi Ryan. They're not my favorite. I didn't love those. But anyway, people talk about this as being like to like fill the SJM gap if you're really into that, because it's a strong female protagonist. There is a bit of a romance going on, and just a female-led story. I would not. It's not a copy. It's its own thing. But she has to undergo, along with Max, who is very reluctant to train her to be tested. They end up, of course, experiencing shared trauma. He is a horribly tortured individual. There are some things in his past that are very, very dark. I do want this to be as spoiler-free as possible. But I just kind of wanted to share with you guys my overall thoughts of this series. I think it's pretty well written. I think the characterization is good. I do think that the best book of the series is the first one. I think the world building was really, it was well done. Tasana's characterization was good. Max's was good, and yeah, the issue that I have with this is that with our two main characters, I don't really feel like they grew anymore after the first book. Like, Tasana is almost saintly. She doesn't have any, like, flaws. I mean, you can't fault her in terms of, like, her skin and the fact that she has scars. I mean, because she self-sacrifices. Every opportunity she has, she self-sacrifices. But this is just like such a weird beef to have with a book, that a character is too perfect. She is. Like, it's almost annoying. Like, she never expresses any real level of selfishness. It's like saintly behavior to me. I mean, of course, there's some sexual content in here. I don't mean that kind of saintly, but I just mean like her selflessness and her ability to just seemingly always make the best decision she can in every situation. It starts to wear on you after a while. Like this, I feel like her strongest sense of purpose is in here, and she's actively trying to better her magics and understand this world, and there's a language barrier and all kinds of stuff, and her interactions with Max in the beginning are really, really good. I honestly think that's the strongest. But the problem is that development doesn't stretch out really through the majority of the trilogy. So to have so much of it told from her and Max's perspective when there's not a lot of growth, it becomes almost tedious spending time with them. And that's not to say there's not other things going on. There are wars happening. There's some interesting themes in terms of just like vengeance when does it end, like how cyclic it can be. So I hurt you, then you hurt me, and then I hurt you again, and then you hurt me. Like among nations, there's fae in here as well. They're just like an immortal species. And you don't really see too much of the fae until like a little bit in book 2, but mainly in book 3. And you know, the girlfriend is just trying to save her people, and she gets drawn into all these other conflicts. I will say that our main enemy is fairly well done. We end up with another enemy, which to be honest, I didn't think his storyline made much sense. You do get to see the most character development with this creature called Riche. Like I said, I don't want to give too much away. This creature, it kind of inhabits Tisana for a little while and had inhabited Max in events before this book happened. So we were talking about shared trauma. And the development of this weird, like fully magical, very, very magically powerful being is interesting. But like I said, it gets to be a little just almost eye-rolling how perfect she is all the time. Like, I just need her to have like a flaw. I need her to, like, at any point in time, think about giving up. And she never does. Like, there's nothing, there's just not enough there. Like, if I was going to compare it to Throne of Glass with Aelin's development, you get other stories, you get the layers, you understand her childhood trauma, you understand about her trying to forget all of that and kind of create herself a new persona, and then she has to do it again, and so much of it is about survival. And when she finally accepts her role and everything and what she has to do, that's something you don't really even get to until like 3/4 of the way through the 3rd book, if you're not even including the set of novellas, The Assassin's Blade. You know, so like you're in it with her and seeing levels of pettiness and selfishness and not wanting to do it, knowing how exhausting it's going to be. And with Tisana, you just never really go on that journey. She has set herself out that this is what she's going to do. She never deviates. She never really shows signs of weakness. And I don't like that inhumanness, because it ends up reading really flat. That they're not bringing anything relatable to the table necessarily. And so yeah, I didn't love that. I felt that the side characters were very underdeveloped. Like her best friend, who she goes back for, the other slave, and he sounds really interesting. I don't know why we don't get more of him with it. You know, like in terms of this being compared to Throne of Glass, we spend a tremendous amount of time in Throne of Glass with our side characters, where they become just as important, if not more important to some of us, than our main protagonists. And I didn't feel attached to any of them. Even like Samarin, I think is his name, who is Max's friend, who's with them through a lot of it, but doesn't really communicate very much with them. You don't really get a sense of him all that much, except he's just like kind of the long-suffering friend. And there's very little development there. So, like, if I was going to rate this on like a 5-star scale, I would put it like solidly in like 3 stars. I think I would give this series. I might go back to it. I mean, I did purchase them because they're self-published through Amazon to get the hardcovers. They're pretty expensive. I mean, they're like $26 each. And so whenever I invest in books, I have a need to hold on to them, maybe give them another chance. They're not bad books. Putting it at a solid 3 means that it was a solid story. I'm just saying, in terms of character development, it didn't go far enough. I just didn't get enough before we've just established perfection. So like there's not enough in there for me to really get attached. And like things happen, you know, people die, and of course, but I didn't cry. I didn't like sob. It wasn't emotionally devastating to me. I just didn't feel that attached. And then like when you're in book 2, they do a horrible trope that I lost my memory and I don't remember who you are. I think to try and build back tension between her and Max. And that was terrible. It's terrible. It's terrible. I hate that trope. I really, really do. The lost memory, and now I have to like figure out and fall back in love with you kind of deal. She doesn't stretch it the whole book. It's like maybe a quarter of the book. No. Yeah. Where that's going on, thank goodness, or I would have a much lower rating for it. I didn't need it. I didn't think that it added anything to the story. You get his brother comes back, Max's brother, and he is like the flattest character ever. You don't get anything. So like I said, I honestly think that the person who had the most interesting storyline was the villain, who I identify as the villain. I mean, there are several bad people that I thought was the most interesting. And I'm not talking, if you guys end up reading, I'm not talking about the Threllians with the slaves, the Zorokobs. I'm not talking about them. They're terrible, but they're very flat. I mean, they're terrible. And I didn't even blink in terms of what happens with them. Like, I didn't, whatever. But the main villain to me, and the obsession that she has regarding the future and what she would be willing to do to protect her people, it mirrors what the Fae King is trying to do as well. So it's just like this mass elimination. Now, I do think there are some interesting themes, and the themes are good. And initially when they're presenting, like, I get it, talking about vengeance, talking about when you have these weapons, that we seek out weapons to feel like we're going to protect ourselves, so we'll be safe, so we have to just utterly destroy everyone else. I mean, I think that that's a perspective people have. But once you end up with multiple weapons, or people can replicate them, then that constantly needing to try and leg up each other ends up where no one wins and everyone's going to die. So they do explore that in terms of at what point in time do we need to set aside the weapons and the words and come together and figure out a way to move forward so we all can make it. And it's the only way you can do it. And however, the Fae King to me, I don't know, for whatever reason, I just didn't vibe with it. I can't say there was anything particularly wrong with his characterization. I just didn't feel attached. That's, I think, the big thing. I never really attached myself to these characters after the first book, because I did, and I really liked Tasana. I loved her. I love Max. I love all of that in this first book. So I don't know if it just goes on too long for what she was trying to do. Perhaps it should have been a duology. I mean, they're chunky books. Like this third one, that was a big book. But it just felt a little too stretched out. You just had too many wars on all these different fronts. I would have liked it better if there had been more of an alliance situation where there were more lessons to be learned, where people realized that their whole outlook on things was just overly fanatical, and more of an eye-opener. And you don't get that with our main villain. Like, I'm trying not to do that. Like, there's no realization over what she's done. Like, she's just such a broken individual. But it's interesting to see how she got there, and her justifications for doing what she does are just so wackadoo to me. So I enjoyed reading about her probably the most. But anyway, so like I said, it could have just been that I wasn't in the right headspace for these when I read them. I don't know. I was ready. Like I said, the first book I sped through, really loved it. Started slowing down midway through the second. Like, it wasn't gripping me anymore. Like I said, I just didn't think that there was enough character development throughout the second and third book to really keep me emotionally invested in the outcome of the story with these characters. So that's my review. It's a solid 3. I mean, it's a good read. It's fine. I just, to have something constantly be compared to SJM and like how I felt reading Throne of Glass, I was expecting more. And those are my own expectations. So maybe I just went in with higher expectations. I feel like sometimes that happens when I'm reading books that are so overly hyped, like Priory of the Orange Tree is a good example. There's nothing really wrong with Priory of the Orange Tree. It's a good book. It's well constructed, but when something is so hyped, like you're expecting like just to be blown out of your socks. And I think that's a really tough expectation, and like what's going to live up to that? So I think maybe I just do that to myself. But I would recommend that you pick them up. At least pick up the first one and see how you feel about it. If you really get attached to these characters, kind of see how you feel about how it continues. It is a solidly written story. There's nothing really wrong with it. It's just, for my personal taste, I needed more complex character development with our main characters to keep me invested in the story. So anyway, if you do decide to pick these books up, or you've already read them, please let me know in the comments. And I'd love to continue the discussion there.